Welcome back to Making It Awkward. I'm your host, Jessica Wilson. Today's episode features an interview with Dr. Chucks, co-editor of the newly published Eating Disorders Don't Discriminate, Stories of Illness, Hope, and Recovery from Diverse Voices. He co-edited the book with Bailey Spinn, a musician and TikToker. In a section of the book about race, he wrote, quote, "Back in 2021, I tweeted, we need way more Black doctors in eating disorders. Someone then replied, and male, I think." He goes on to say, quote, "While I applaud this comment, this is typical of my experience in the eating disorder field. People seem quick to move the conversation away from issues of race. And as a field, we still seem massively uncomfortable talking about this," end quote, which is so true. And in this interview, that discomfort is showcased, but this time it's between the two of us about the book. It was kind of awkward. And I think that sentiment also fits with a lot of the eating disorder field's reaction to Oprah's recent primetime special, an Oprah special, Shame, Blame, and the Weight Loss Revolution. It's about using weight loss medications. And I use the word reaction and not response intentionally. It seemed like a lot of my colleagues were triggered. After the special, an unknown to me organization called the Collaborative of Eating Disorders put out a statement saying it is extremely concerned about the lack of consideration for eating disorders in Oprah's special, which is confusing to me. I'm unclear why a pharmaceutically supported program about prescription drug use with the goal of making people smaller would also be expected to include something about eating disorders. I have asked the collaborative for an interview, and I emailed back and forth with an intermediary, but nothing has been set up as of yet. I continue to welcome the opportunity for an interview. This disappointment in Oprah seemed very similar to the backlash Lizzo received when she talked about a cleanse she was doing for 10 days back in 2020, and she wasn't even trying to lose weight. Oprah and Lizzo have never claimed to be eating disorder prevention ambassadors or spokespeople for fat liberation. The essays that people in my field have written about their disappointment in Black women for doing what they want to do with their own bodies, while at the same time talking about body autonomy and freedom, is simply weird, but also predictable. I'll tell you what did not happen. When Oprah interviewed Adele for her One Night Only special in 2021, in which Adele talked about her 100-pound weight loss, I did not see think pieces on how she had let the eating disorder field down. No dissertations or official statements talking about how she was promoting eating disorders or expecting her to prevent them. The double standards when it comes to Black women and white women remain strikingly clear. Clara of Your Dietitian BFF recently wrote an award-winning short script about the response to Oprah for an Instagram reel. In this, she reminded me of a line in my book, quote, "It seems she existed only to make these women feel better about their bodies. If a fat Black woman could find a way to love her body, then certainly they could too." At the time, that line was referencing Lizzo, and it turns out it applies to Oprah as well. Back to Chuck's statement, it remains the case that when it comes to the eating disorder field, it's incredibly difficult to talk about race. As you'll hear in our interview, I had reservations about joining his project. I was initially asked to write the intro to the binge eating disorder chapter and was given the names of some people who were contributing. I Googled around and found one of them sharing strategies to avoid binging, like jumping up and down 30 times, and another had publicly talked about achieving her weight loss goals by not binging anymore. There was also a researcher for another section of the book whose work centered around the prevention of both eating disorders and weight gain. Of course, I had thoughts, and as you'll hear Chuck say here, not everyone will agree on everything. And he wanted to make sure everyone could see themselves in the book. We compromised on me writing about binging itself rather than binge eating disorder. With that, let's get into it. Chuck's was having a bit of trouble connecting, and the audio was a bit wonky, even with the best of Jen's efforts. Welcome to the show.
Hello, thank you. Hi, Jessica. Hello.
Hello. Tell us who you are, a bit about yourself.
My name's, full name, Chukwuemeka, Nwuba, but everyone just calls me either Emeka or Chucks, but some people say Chucks. I work as a mental health doctor. I'm based in London, and I have a really really big interest in eating disorders in particular. I'm currently a junior doctor and just going through the rotations here in the UK.
Can you tell us a little bit about a junior doctor for the US folks? I don't know. Is that like a
So
resident or
anyone who's not there's a massive, if you like, a ladder, and anyone who's not a consultant at the top of the food chain is called a junior doctor. So, for
Oh.
example, you could have doctors who are like super senior,
Mhm.
but they're not officially consultants. They're called junior doctors. Or you can have someone who's just newly graduated as a doctor, and they're called junior doctors. So, I don't know whether you've been too aware of what's been happening over here and the kind of discontentment with the NHS and all the rest of it. Yeah, exactly. So there's been junior doctor strikes.
Mhm.
And it's quite interestingly, there's our current health secretary. She said she doesn't like calling people junior doctors. She likes calling people doctors in training, which is ridiculous. And quite offensive. And quite
Uh-huh.
offensive to a lot of people because, people have been medics for, you
Mhm.
know, 15 years that, I mean, they're not in training. I mean, it was funny because she recently just became health secretary. So people were just saying, taking the mick and saying she's a health secretary in training.
Nice.
Yeah. So, but the reality is, yeah, it's kind of a newish term. Before they used to break it up into different types of junior doctor, so it's a bit clearer who you're talking to. It's very,
Mhm.
so you say junior doctor, like it could mean anything.
In the context of being a junior doctor, at
Yeah.
what point did you become interested in eating disorders?
Good question. So I kind of fell into eating disorders, and so throughout the whole of medical school, I wanted to be an eye surgeon, so an ophthalmologist. My CV absolutely packed with eye related things.
Mhm.
Um, And because my dad is a psychiatrist, a mental health doctor as well, so I kind of wanted to avoid mental health at all costs. I don't know. I just didn't want to be
Yeah.
a like mini me or some sort of like just.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm copying him or something, but I think it is the thing here in the UK. I don't know about the US, but it's super competitive ophthalmology, which I don't mind. I don't mind competition, but I think the biggest thing is the people that were doing it were like so passionate about it, and I can't
Mhm.
say I was on the same level with passion. Um,
Mhm.
and so I took a year out to decide what I wanted to do. I kind of did have a background interest in mental health because I had some really great placements as a medical student.
Mhm.
I took a year out to work in a mental health hospital. And
Mhm.
so on the day, the lady just says, "Oh yeah, just to let you know, you're going to be working on an eating disorders ward." And I was like, "All right,
Mm.
cool." And she said, "Have you ever done an NG tube before? Have you ever done a nasogastric tube before?"
Sure.
And I said, "Yeah, of course. That's no, we do that in med school. That's no big deal type thing." And so that's it. So all these years later, I'm on a clinical level. I find it so interesting, and I can't say that there are too many specialties within medicine that have, or surgery, that have such a holistic approach.
Mm.
You're talking about the acutely psychological, the mental, the, if you like, the um that sort of aspect, the mind, and then you have the body, the more physical aspect, which is, and it just most have either or, but this really comes together
Mm.
as one. So I particularly appreciate that.
That's great. How long has it been since you started that?
Probably 4.5, nearly 5 years.
Okay.
Uh, yeah,
So
altogether.
yeah,
What?
that's not that long to get to writing a book. So how many years in? Is that 3? Is that 4? I don't know. And then you were like, there
Yeah,
needs to be a book.
but this is not exactly. So this is the whole point. So this is like, so I'm writing the book from a context of, wow, look how little I knew. So I could imagine this. So you're a medical doctor, and people assume you know everything about everything. Most medical doctors are
Mhm.
very similar, are familiar with people coming to them with
Mm.
um issues about themselves or whatever it is. And yes, you get good, decent training, but then there's a specializing process. I think the what kickstart not actually kickstarted the book, but what really got me passionate about the education of eating disorders is the amount of the journey that it took from knowing virtually nothing. Because at
Mm.
medical school, you get maybe
Mhm.
a couple of hours teaching in the whole 5-6 years. So yeah, to learning so much and hearing so many stories I hadn't even, so overwhelmed by, really, to be honest, with kind of stuff that we came across. And so I thought, goodness me, at all my stereotypes day by day about how old you had to be to experience an eating disorder, or your ethnicity, or in terms of age, not age, in terms of socioeconomic status, all these different things, just one by one, just absolutely dismantled. So I thought, okay, we need to get this information out there, if not just to medics, to the wider public as well.
What made you decide to do an anthology versus more like an academic or prescriptive type of book?
This is the whole point. So, I'm not, and I keep telling people, I'm not an eating disorders specialist. I am a junior doctor with an interest in eating disorders, and I know that there's very few physicians or clinicians in this field, especially those of color, and those that are really passionate about taking the conversation beyond the four walls that they currently stand. And so I write this book from a perspective of a junior doctor who is excited about what he's learned, from not just actual clinical practice, but also from all these amazing stories which the book captures. And I feel like that was one of the reasons why I had other real heavy hitters, legends who in the field to write in the book, such as yourself. We have the whole MDT, we have the dietitian, we have pediatrician, psychologist, we have nurse, the whole MDT, because it takes that sort of approach to really get at an eating disorder sometimes. And so yeah, that's definitely why I didn't go for an academic kind of angle. Plus, there's enough of that personally. And we can add more, of course, but I think really we need to know more about our patients. We need to get more research. I mean, what are we going to write about? There's a fantastic, actually relatively recent, you would know about this book, about the management of eating disorders for Black individuals. You may have seen it.
No.
A good piece of work.
What's it
I'll
called? I'll link to it. I don't know.
Yeah, absolutely. Very, very good.
Oh, wait,
good
the one by two Black women?
Yes.
Oh,
exactly.
No. Okay, this is going to be recorded, so we're just going to leave this in here. I have heavily critiqued 50% of that duo. One of them is now the president of IADEP. And a couple years ago, I definitely wrote about it in my book. She gave a presentation on why Black women develop eating disorders. And she was very focused on binge eating disorder and said it was because Black women came to college and saw Black men dating white women and started eating emotionally, and that eventually led to binge eating disorder. And I said, you need to be fired. But anyhow, so you're talking about that book.
This is what I mean by, interestingly you say this. This is one of the challenges with writing the book. Three main challenges. Firstly, logistically, with a knife.
Yeah.
So many different writers from different parts of the world. Secondly, as I think we were talking beforehand, is to write it without going too deep that the book becomes a how-to manual for people with eating disorders. So you want to explain some detail, but not too much. And thirdly, this space is notoriously contentious. People have so many different opinions. And one thing I've learned in general, not just being a doctor, but just in the wide world, is you're never going to please everyone. So you need to have thick skin, especially when I was communicating. We're trying to communicate an idea, bringing in 30 plus different people. The 30 writers aren't going to agree on everything. That's just fact. That's just human. It would be, they say variety is the spice of life, but ultimately, just being different is normal. We have different experiences. So I can't say I've read every word of that book, which I mentioned, but I get that's part of the thing, isn't it? We need to get more research out there. We need to get more books which talk about, even not you just diversity, we talk about ethnicity, we talk about race, talking about other aspects, diversity, in terms of neurodiversity, or in terms of gender or sexuality, We need to get books out there which tackle a variety of these things. So yeah, so I mean, you've obviously come across the book. By the sounds of it, you've fully dissected it.
No, I haven't at all. Actually, this book came out before that webinar, and I saw it was by two middle-aged Black women, and I was like, I don't want to be able to critique this book. I don't want to know anything about it because I don't want to hate it. I don't want anybody to ask me what I think about it. It's basically because I don't want to say it sucks since it's one of the only things out there for Black people. But then I heard her talk and I was like, oh, so yes, different perspectives. I think it's good for you to point that out. I'm sure that book is helpful for some people and they're grateful for it. And it can be what it is. Speaking of thick skin, I was one of those people who was like, so I already have concerns with some of the people who are going to be in this book. And you were like, you know what? Not everybody's going to agree on what something needs to be. I wrote, the intro to it was binge eating disorder chapter, but I just wrote about binge eating because you and I, we're going back and forth. Someone's content in the chapter was talking online about how she would jump up and down 30 times when she felt a binge coming on so she wouldn't binge. And I was like, that does not sound like binge eating disorder. That sounds more perhaps like anorexia. And you were like, you know what? Everybody's story is important.
That's like that. This is spot on. That sounds like something I would say. That is essentially different. I think I told you about this. I didn't feel comfortable releasing or creating a book such as this, which is meant to be a collaboration of different voices around different eating disorders. The 5 most common ones, so we have OSFED, others specified feeding eating disorder, binge eating disorder, bulimia nervosa, anorexia nervosa, and ARFID, avoiding restrictive food intake disorder. I didn't feel comfortable writing a book which brings those 5 different eating disorders without including certain individuals in it. As far as I'm concerned, we needed someone who was East Asian in the book, especially in the restrictive eating disorder section, because we know that there's such a large issue in that community, and so on and so forth. So that is an example of, I knew, for example, having members of the LGBTQ plus community, we know they're more likely to experience disordered eating in all its different variations. So we needed to, and so these are the sort of things which, as co-editor of the book, it was important, paramount, that these were in. So essentially, so bringing all these different voices together, I think, was really, really important. And there was probably more thought that went into it, and that was one of the stresses that people, more thought than probably people realize. Yeah, so that's how it came together.
Totally. So it came together and it's rolling out. You and I, met in like fall of 2022. Yes.
I think so. Yeah.
In 2022. And then my book was slated to come out in February. I met you at a coffee shop and we talked about writing a book. What did you think about my experience thus far? Was anything that I shared helpful for you?
Oh, yeah. Oh, my goodness. Gosh, well, you told me, you really gave me a lot of advice. I think firstly, seeing you in the process and near the end of the process massively helped. So probably more so than just than you realize. So yeah, I massively thank you for that. You also told me about the importance of really driving kind of publicity about the book.
Yeah.
There's only limited resources from the publishers end. And I must say that is, this is something which very early on in the process, I took heed to that and was like, you know what, I need to drive this because this is obviously the publishers, they helped out in the best way they could, but given their resources. But this is a message that, and all the collaborators in the book really put a lot of effort in, and we needed to get this in front of as many eyes as possible. So yeah, hence why I'm so grateful for the amount of amazing positive feedback we've had. It's been overwhelming, really. It's got some of the people I can't even imagine talking about eating disorders
Mm.
are talking about it.
Mm-hmm.
Communities that, you know, I probably to a certain extent hadn't even maybe heard of some of the eating disorders. They're now talking about it, and it's exciting. It's exciting.
I'm so glad that I told you to hit the ground running. Like yesterday, start talking about your book to people, collaborating, start making connections for people out there who are listening to this. Like, start yesterday. Don't wait till it's like 6 months or even 3 months out, is just start talking to people. So I'm so glad that was helpful. And clearly it was amazing. So I flew over there just for this book launch. So tell us how it went.
It was amazing because I actually reached out to the American team as it happens, and then they CC'd in the UK team. They're all very excited about it.
Wait, which team?
Google YouTube team.
Okay.
And they you know, there's so many synergies really, because YouTube had recently released its eating disorders guidelines not too long before that.
Okay.
So they were very much on their radar.
Okay.
And so when I think of YouTube, Google, I think of communication, I think of community, I think of togetherness, I think of getting a messages out there. And so I explained to them, and you know, this is a unique piece. You know, this sort of collaboration hasn't before. There's not one book. Actually, someone asked me, "Oh, are there any other books that you recommend?" I said, then this is quite literally the reason why we wrote the book, because there aren't any other books like this. Of course, I can recommend Hunger by Roxane Gay. I can recommend Sabrina's Strings book, and all sorts of beautiful books. You know, Always Be Nice by yourself. I can always recommend books like that. But there has been a collaborative piece which shares a variety of experiences and also acts as an educational piece as well. So I write at the start, give some information about the different eating disorders, and yeah, they loved it. So then we ended up actually hosting it at the HQ. There, people from everywhere came, from America, Mexico, Germany, France. It really was a beautiful. And then I got a message afterwards. Interestingly, they said it was a record-breaking event. They've never had that many people there.
Yeah, it was huge.
Capacity of 240 and 230 turned up. So 235 turned up. So and not just that, the crowd was so mixed, which I think was particularly remarkable considering the topic, and considering we know that we've all been to eating disorders conferences and all the rest of it. Like, it's not unusual for me to be the only black guy in the room. So this obviously wasn't the case at the event. I mean, obviously my family were there, so it was never going to be. But you know, there are other wider people, and you know, a few people you knew yourself, you know, outside of if you like the world of eating disorders. So yeah, it was very, very exciting. And then I've had other opportunities that stem from that. And it's just, it's been truly great.
So shout out to Keisha, another Black woman in the eating disorder field that was there. It was beautiful. And then I got to meet my, podcast role model, Kelechi Okafor, out there. So yeah, it was great seeing you. The book event was great. And I also had a great time. And of course, Bailey, she co-edited the book, you were telling me, to make sure that there wasn't anything triggering in there for folks.
Yeah, the role was to read through in the same way I guess I read through a lot of the pieces. And we went through, amended what we needed to amend to make sure it was palatable for the, I guess as an editor would, make sure it's palatable for the reader, make sure it's accurate, make sure it's referenced. But yeah, having the lived experience meant then able to key into in a way which I guess I, as a clinician, haven't been able to do. Also, she's just very, very good at getting information out there. That's essentially, I guess, what she does. And so we thought it would be a tremendous collaboration. Also, she's obviously a woman, I'm a male, I'm black, she's white, she's very young, much younger than me. And I think in general, hitting different demographics is at the heart of what the book is all about, and really getting it out there as wide as possible. And throughout the whole book, we talk about, how it's important for us to not stereotype eating disorders as being suffered by white, skinny, cisgendered, wealthy young women. But at the same time, as I explained at the book launch, it's very important to not demonize people from that category that do experience it. Acutely aware that a lot of my patients do fall into that category. But it's about widening the scope. And again, I mentioned that I may have mentioned it at the launch event, but I wrote a piece for the Royal College of Psychiatrists highlighting that the net of our care needs to extend a lot further than it is being extended at the moment. And there's all sorts of recommendations that I make in that piece, which landed quite well. People, and I hope, as the years, someone asked me recently, what's my wish? And my wish is that some of these recommendations, not just because they're mine, but some of the actual ways in which we can extend that net out to reach more people, and that they actually come to fruition. So that would be my wish. But yeah, that essentially was why in particular, I did think the collaboration was quite powerful, which is why we were able to reach so many people.
Yes. So do you think that it was essential for it to be a thin, cis white woman, or it could have been still a queer or trans person of color and you would have got a similar benefit?
I guess it's a hypothetical. I know it didn't have to be. That's how it landed.
I'm curious about the landing. In a book about...
What's your opinion? What do you reckon?
I'm wondering how, when the book was going to be about everyone else and widening this umbrella of folks who had eating disorders, that we ended up with somebody who has multiple books written about themselves already, and really then editing folks of color, queer folks, men, perhaps editing, or at least having feedback. And not letting the folks who are not at the center of the story be the ones to perhaps have the feedback or more drive the conversation.
Yeah. I think in nature, as with any good editor, you don't take away from the story, and so it needed to sing harmoniously, and it needed to be essentially a safe book to read. Like I mentioned, important to take certain things out that may be triggering. And as you know, these books run. You've been through the process yourself. These books are run through all sorts of publishers, all sorts of different folk. Actually, including members of my family, read the book. Gave their to say grammatically, things like that. Really had a look at it. Obviously, it came down to myself and Bailey to get it right. But more than that, Bailey actually wrote in the book, which was really really important to get some different insights. But it from my perspective, it was a collaboration which added value, yeah, I mean, just even just some of the feedback we've been getting, it's been honestly, Jessica, it's been tremendous. It really has been exciting.
Tell us about the places you've been, the BBC, the ITV, all of these. Yeah,
ITV. Very interesting experience being live on TV. I don't know. I'm assuming you've been.
No, they pre-recorded it for ABC, which was wonderful.
Oh, wow, ABC big time. Wow. Okay, yeah. So I guess with pre-recordings, you can probably get really a lot more detail.
But yeah, they edited really when nice anytime I ran on, it was such a relief. So you were live. This is amazing.
It really tricky being live, but it was great fun. They're brilliant team on This Morning. It's called. That's the TV show on ITV, which is fighting on the big two TV networks in the UK, and or well, arguably big three. Yeah, really, really exciting. I went on there with Diane Buswell, one of the writers in
Mm-hmm.
the book. Um, Probably the most, in terms of household name, but one of the most, if you like, popular, arguably. Um, yeah, really, really great experience. I was able to get across the heart of the book, which is hope.
Okay.
I think when people read, when people read the book, they'll hopefully that will hit
Mm-hmm.
them hard. That actually someone can be deep in an eating disorder but
Mm-hmm.
make it out. Um, and also, like we've already mentioned, validating one's experience. So yeah, I was able to talk about that. I was able to do a similar thing on the BBC
Mm-hmm.
on radio show. Again, for those that don't know, BBC, British Broadcasting Corporation, one of the big three
Yeah.
channels in the UK, the national channel as it were. Really, really great opportunities. There's a few magazines, a few newspapers, a few medical journals, um, all over social media. It's been really overwhelming, to be honest. So yeah, it's just really exciting. And the good thing is, this isn't a conversation which dies here. It's a conversation which should hopefully continue. And I think that's partly, my job, your job, those of us in this space to just keep the conversations going and just educate the public. Because as we know, there's more. As you write these books, as I'm sure you wrote your one, with the hope that it doesn't. You don't want what you're
Mm-hmm.
saying to be too dated too
Mm-hmm.
quickly. Um, but equally, the reality is there will be more research, there'll be
Yeah.
more evidence, there'll be more things that can be added, and it will be broaden the scope. And so, I hope this is a launch pad to anyone else who wants to do collaborative
Mm-hmm.
projects with, just get excited about diversity in this space.
I think that's great.
Yeah.
Do you think there were any aspects or stories in the book that were particularly helpful for either you to read or you really wanted people to hear?
Oh, good. Yeah, yeah, fantastic. I mean, I'm not meant to have favorites, uh, but I did find the piece by Lee Chambers particularly powerful. Maybe because I'm a black male, um, there is something about all male spaces
Mm,
that are absolutely incredible. Um, Men opening up is something which to do with the social norms is hopefully changing. But one of the roles, which I think the important roles, one of the things that I think Lee's piece will do is at least I hope so, is it will validate certain people's experiences and also get people feeling as though they may be able to talk about it. And look, I'm not gonna say one piece in a book is gonna be the difference maker, but I think as many pieces or as many stories similar to his that can
mm-hmm.
be shared. Also, he talks about his
Mm-hmm.
neurodiversity as well. But just in general, I did really really like the piece, and I think again it hit home because he was um if you
Mm-hmm.
like a black male, and the only one in the book of
Mm-hmm.
that description.
So you've alluded to opportunities that all of this has brought you. What's next for you?
To be honest, just being learning as a junior doctor. I just feel there's so much more learning to do. I want to be involved in more research. I think there's a lot of information because like I mentioned, I think I mentioned in the book, or maybe just in general, I always talk about it how a lot of the research in when it comes to eating disorders are either American or they're old. That's the reality.
Mm-hmm.
Most of it, anyway, at least that it's
Mm-hmm.
comes to black people or people of color. It's either American or it's old. Um, and I think it would be nice to change that because there are key differences. Not even just talking about the number of people, um, in percentage wise in the US versus here. There are key differences, but yeah, I would like to be involved in some description. But yeah, like I said, I'm on my training pathway. A few interesting projects which I can't talk too much about. But yeah, hopefully the conversation continues, and I'd love to keep if it's keep writing, keep communicating that on my platforms. Which, to be honest, I don't know how people do it. It's a lot.
Especially people with full-time jobs. Yes.
So I know I respect you. I respect you, and just in general, just people in this space, especially when it feels like sometimes you're really fighting an uphill sort of battle. People have been really, really gracious when it comes to this project, and I think hopefully the ground is slightly less hard than when we started, and I know ground hardens quite quickly over time. Hopefully there'll be repetitive. This is the thing. If you have a really set piece like this and there's nothing for like 5 years or 10 years, that sort of thing, and then that's where it takes. People shouldn't think because this book has come out, at least from you can't do something similar. Why not? Keep getting your messages out there. Keep collaborative pieces. It's very, very important. Yeah, so that's kind of what I would say. Definitely a season of learning, continued learning, and yeah, I'll just see what opportunities come my way, because I'm very much the kind of guy who I kind of just go for like opportunities as they come. I don't think too far in advance.
Okay.
I don't know whether that's a good thing or a bad thing.
Yeah, it's honestly how I have lived my life as well. And it's gotten us to where we are. So look at us. We're thriving. Thriving.
That's it.
I'm so glad you came on to chat.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Thanks again to Chucks for coming on for an interview. When I saw him at the book launch, he said that he'd look forward to coming on the show for some awkward conversations. And I think we succeeded. I get it. It seems we just can't get away from the ways that white women are often central to the conversations about eating disorders. When it comes to the president of IADEP and her reasoning for Black women developing eating disorders, it still centered the attraction to white women from Black men. And even in my case, I did my first book event with Allison and was in conversation with her, as her involvement in my book got my publisher's attention to holding an event in New York City. I think Chucks is right. We're truly not going to agree on everything in this field. And for his book, if everyone sees a part of themselves in the book, maybe they'll buy it and read the whole thing and learn from others' experiences. So as Chuck said, let's let our books be just the beginning. Let's not wait 5 or 10 years for the next one. There are so many stories yet to be told. Before we go, without planning for Oprah's special, next week's episode just happens to have some of the research of GLP-1s. Asher Laramie will be back on the show. I'll ask him 3 things he wants people to know about Ozempic and about diabetes. His last appearance on the show was the response episode to my interview with Dr. Blair Peters about BMI requirements for gender-affirming surgery. Asher was pretty critical of how Blair's whiteness was showing up in the work they did. In our episode, Asher invites me to ask him about how whiteness shows up in his work. And that also became incredibly awkward. For all of you out there who are listening, I hope you, too, can make it awkward. This has been Making It Awkward. I'm Jessica Wilson. If you're enjoying what you're hearing, I'd love a rating or review. Thanks so much to J.N. Elliott, who says, my interview with Diabetes Digital is so important for dietitians and those looking for dietitians to hear. Wendy and Jessica are so on point. You can watch this episode on YouTube and Spotify. This is a production of The Body Politic and is supported by Patreon members and the Legacy of Sacramento Outboard Services. All of the social media clips you see are done by Jen Jacobs, who also edits and mixes the show.